So a question I get a lot is, what is the dark night of the soul in spiritual awakening? This is a subject that's very dear to my heart. I've actually written a book on the subject, and the reason it's so dear to me is because 99% of people drop out of the spiritual awakening journey when they hit the spiritual dark night of the soul. And of course, we need people to awaken. We need people to complete the journey because we're here to lead the human race in this dimension on Earth to global enlightenment. So let me explain what is the dark night of the soul in spiritual awakening. So it happens more than once during awakening. So there's two types of dark night of the soul. However, the root cause of each is the same. It's constriction of the chakras. Now, in the early part of awakening, typically before we're even aware that we are on this journey, we have something which is called the growth-oriented dark night of the soul. And this has a very specific purpose. Its purpose is to encourage you to grow, hence growth-oriented. And what happens during this period is we're encouraged to examine our behaviours, we're encouraged to examine our past trauma and to do the work that we need to do to untangle it. Now, depending on what has happened to you and how you're behaving will depend on which chakras are constricted. So this type of dark night of the soul can manifest in many different ways. But what you'll typically find is you feel miserable. You know that there's something that isn't right in your life. You feel that you just can't live like this anymore, whether it's internal or external, or maybe a combination of both. And we may have physical symptoms that accompany this. We may have chronic health conditions, or things might just be going wrong for us in our life. And we know that fundamentally things need to change. And what the universe will do is it will make things more and more difficult for us until we take that action that's required. And the reason that the universe wants us to take that action is because we have to reach a certain level of emotional stability before we can proceed into our conscious awakening. So this early kind of dark night of the soul during spiritual awakening is very much about moving forward, developing and growing. We're being prompted to fix things. So how do you do that? Well, there's two main ways. The first one is you need to do your inner work. So if you're going through a dark night of the soul, you're not in your conscious awakening, you just know that you feel miserable, things are not working out for you, then you have to go inwards. You have to examine what is it that happened to you in your life that needs to be addressed, that needs to be untangled. You need to be able to park it, solve it, move away, progress. That's what that's all about. The other thing that you might need to do is untangle yourself from specific situations, a relationship that you know is damaging for you, or maybe you're repeating patterns of relationships that you know are unhealthy. You need to solve that problem. Perhaps you're in a job you hate. Perhaps you have been taught that money is the most important thing and you should stay in a job because it's stable, it's secure and it pays you enough to live, but you know it's eating away at your soul and it's really not fulfilling you in the way that you need to be fulfilled. These are all hallmarks of a growth-oriented dark night of the soul. So inner work and solve those things in your life that aren't working for you. Make those changes, big changes. Along the way, you'll probably learn some spiritual techniques, spiritual in air quotes there. You might start to eat more healthily. You might do more exercise. You might spend more time in nature, perhaps. These are all spiritual techniques, but they're not overt. But still they are aiding the spiritual development of your soul or your entire being, which is the human avatar that you find yourself in whilst you're incarnated on Earth in this dimension. So that is the early dark night of the soul, the growth-oriented dark night of the soul. But when we ask ourselves, what is the dark night of the soul in spiritual awakening? Really, typically what people are talking about is the spiritual dark night of the soul. And this comes later in the journey. It typically occurs after a period, a phase of awakening called connection, where we have lots of spontaneous communication with our guides, with our higher self. We feel intensely connected to the universe. We have otherworldly experiences. We become very aware that there's more to life than this 3D reality we find ourselves in. And typically around this time, prior to the spiritual dark night of the soul, we have our epiphany. So we become acutely aware that there's more going on and that we ourselves are going through a process, and we may or may not understand it as a spiritual awakening process, but that's what it is. That's what's going on. We're at the start of our conscious spiritual awakening. Now, it may seem very cruel that the universe takes all that away from us during the spiritual dark night of the soul, but it's very necessary, because what happens during the connection phase is we come, and that phase can last quite a long time, up to sort of 18 months to a couple of years even. We really become reliant on our guides, and what we forget is we are here to have a human experience. So what the dark night of the soul does, the spiritual dark night of the soul does, is it takes all of that away, and it forces us to lean on our own resources, our own human resources, because at the end of the day, we're in a physical environment, in a physical shell, and we need to navigate our way through it. And if we just lose all of our ability to do that, then we can't progress. So that's the purpose of the spiritual dark night of the soul. It's for us to relearn that kind of self-sufficiency. Now, it's a very specific phase of awakening. It occurs at 50% integration with our higher self. So the whole goal of spiritual awakening is integration with our higher self from our perspective as an earthbound soul. And it kicks in at this 50%. All connection shuts down. So what you really feel at this point, you can feel very abandoned, and you're wondering why all of these things that you were doing before, the meditation, whatever techniques you were using to connect to your higher self, that connection is just gone. So even if you're still going through the protocols, you're not feeling the connection. And this can lead us to question all of our earlier experience. We start wondering, like, what happened to us? Did we have a psychotic break? Are we going mad? Typically we don't have people around us who are awakening to the same degree at the same time. So we don't even have people that we can talk to who can say, no, don't worry, it's happening to me too. But I'm here to reassure you, okay, everything you experienced before is correct. There is way more going on than 3D reality. The connection you felt as a true connection, and in fact it's still there. But what's happened because of the chakric restriction that the universe has imposed on you at this time, they shut all of your chakras down to, as a minimum, 5% of flow. Because of that, you just can't feel anything, but it's all still there. You're just not feeling it. So how do you get out of that situation? So it's a process, like everything in this dimension. You just have to keep going. Double down on your spiritual practice. Meditate every day, even if you can't feel the connection, which you won't. You just keep doing it. Walk in nature, practice yoga, look after yourself, be kind. And basically what happens is at 65 to 70% of integration, which is ongoing while you're meditating and walking in nature, you're still integrating, you just can't feel it. Once you hit that benchmark, the connection comes back, it's restored. And what you'll find is you then go into a phase called advanced learning, and communication will come back thick and fast because your team is now trying to get you to the next level you need to get to proceed in your journey. You're going to get to 100% integration. That's the end of advanced learning. Then you're going to move into the transcendence phase, and that's where all the magic starts to happen. Everything starts to come together for you. So really the best advice I can give you is you need to understand it's a process. You need to believe that the connection is there waiting for you once you hit a certain level of integration, and that if you keep going with all of your spiritual practice, you will be there. It will come back. It will come back to you. As I said, like 99% of people drop out of the spiritual awakening journey during the dark night of the soul, the spiritual dark night of the soul. And that's the worst possible scenario for us, all this group of old souls who is here to awaken. That's our mission in this lifetime. That's why we're here. If we all drop out, then that creates an enormous problem for us. So please, if this is your experience, if this is what you're going through, continue. Meditate every day. Third eye meditation, that's the one that will help you the most. Just keep going, and what will happen is all of a sudden, almost overnight, it will all just crackle back into being. That communication will be back there for you, and then you'll be in the perfect place to proceed with your spiritual awakening journey.